Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Jason, for showing us your film. Can I ask you guys to briefly introduce yourself and tell us everything you did on this film?
I'm Marshall Karp, and I started. I'm actually the kid in the movie. It's semi-autobiographical, okay? But it happened to me when I was 12, and some of the dumbest lines that the kid says, really, like, "Are you sure this isn't some sort of a local thing? Because if it happened in a Briarman..." I wrote that when I was 12, and then I was in the film business, and I wanted to write a movie, and I wrote this, and a producer said she wanted to do it, and then Jason and I worked together on a television show that was called Not Seinfeld. And when we got the opportunity to work together, there was nobody else I'd rather work with, so thanks.
I'm Mike Jackman, producer on the film. I was lucky enough to get to do this. This was the second film I produced, and from a very strange reason, literally, I'll tell the quick story of why I wound up on the movie. Jean Doumani is the producer who had gotten the rights and was going to make the film, and she had a partner who I knew, and I bugged him every 3 or 4 months. I'd call him and say, "John, you got to hire me for to produce your movie," and he'd say no. And one day, I call him, and as years go by, and he asked what I'm doing. I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on this movie on the Universal lot." He's like, "You're on the Universal lot? Jason Alexander's on the Universal lot, and we're doing a movie with him. Why don't you go over and meet him? If you hit it off, you can produce the movie." I'm like, "Because I'm near him? That's why I'm going to get the job? Because I'm a block?" He's like, "Yeah." Anyway, that's how I got the job, and that's how I got. We hit it off, and we have been. It's a 30-year friendship now, so been very, very happy to have been part of this film.
I directed it. It was the second film I ever directed. The first one you never heard of. Well, you probably never heard of this one either, but it's a. And it was only, I think, because of Marshall that I got a call. And he basically said, "Would you direct my movie?" And I read it and fell in love with it and said, "Yeah, you're dumb enough to hire me. I'm dumb enough to try it." So. And that was the result. And I have not seen, honestly, I have not seen it for 25 years. And we never saw it with an audience. So thank you for being our first medalist.
Okay, and to catch up with the introductions, my name is Will, and I'm the industry liaison here at LIFF. But let's get back to you guys. All right, so the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, about the film is the settings and the time period. I think, especially over the last 15 years, we have seen a lot of films that take place in the 1950s and that speak about childhood and coming of age. Of course, The Fabelmans recently come to mind, but there is also, Tree of Life and other movies. Why did you choose these settings and time period? You talked about, the autobiographical elements in the film, right? How much of yourself and maybe of Jason is in the film?
Well, now they're going to know how old I am. It happened to me in those years, and I spent the summers with my aunt and uncle. I fudged the Italian part. I made him Italian. You have to take some liberties. I mean, it made him more interesting, made him more of a target. But they were a hot young couple, and I was a. Well, you saw the movie. But also, when I said it in 1955, it was because I wanted to capture those values. 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and now 9-year-olds, they're fascinated by sex. Now all they have to do is say, "I want to know more about sex. Let me look at my phone." But back then, if you're lucky, you found National Geographic. But you had to you had to figure it out, and that was the plan. To see two people do it. We made a big mistake. We got an R rating.
Yes.
You know why?
Because there is too many F words in the film?
F word is okay if it's followed by you. If you say F and me, and he says, I want to see two people fucking. And back in 2000, that was what the rating. Now you can. Still the same. I watch kid shows now on streaming. It's different. That's different. Jason, take that, baby. You better appreciate it.
Part of the only so this movie was made, Mike, 3 million? Is that what we had? About 4? The only reason it looks as good as it does is Gene Dumanian, who produced it, was Woody Allen's producing partner. And Woody had shot all these films in that time period and kept all the props, all the costumes. So we were able to sort of raid that warehouse and find stuff. And that was the only way for that budget that we were going to be able to, sort of present that time period again. And then we were extremely lucky. Most of the film is shot in Staten Island. That block that they live on was absolutely perfect. Marsha had written this thing about the weeds at the end of the block, and there was that swampy little area at the end of that block. And what I will tell you, what I remember, and perhaps it's captured in the film. There's a as prurient as some of the action is, there's a sweetness to the film. There's a sweetness to the story. And there was a sweetness that surrounded the making of it. The kids were phenomenal. They were phenomenal. And particularly Ryan, who plays Lenny, we auditioned 100 Jewish and Italian kids from New York and couldn't find Lenny. We couldn't find him, right? He needed the charm. He needed the ability. He's in every scene of the film. While we were casting, we got a videotape from Oklahoma. We didn't even open it. We just went, oh, please, come on. Threw it on a desk, and we had about 3 weeks before we had to start filming, and we hadn't found the star of the film. And comedically, on the location scale, we went, let's open the envelope from Oklahoma. And that was Ryan, and he didn't have the New York accent yet, but he just looked like our kid. So we flew him in with his mom, and we put him with a dialect coach for less than 2 days. And he came in and read some scenes for us, and we went. But I was talking about the sweetness of it all. The collaboration was incredibly sweet. Marshall and I continued to work on the script during shooting, and really in post-production is where all of Lenny's narration, as we were putting the film together, we realized it needed that voice. And so all that narration stuff was written in post-production. And then, without Mike, who is now a big shot, producer conclave, he's an Academy Award nominee, right? But he put together a group of people to execute this film that was extraordinary, and it continued right into that location. Every person on that block had to be okay with this, except one. Yeah, but when I tell you, we had to get rid of their cars. Their cars couldn't be on their street. Period cars had to go on their street. We had to take their air conditioners out of their windows because people didn't have window units in 1955. And we shot in the summer, so it was hot. Every one of those neighbors, except one, were bringing us lemonade and cookies every day. They were so happy. They're all in the block party scene. That's all them. And there was one guy, I'll just talk about the one guy. Even Mike could not charm this guy. And he was right smack dab in the middle of the block on Hetty's side of the street. So if you looked up the block in any way, this one guy wanted more money than anybody else we had paid. And we couldn't do that because we had made the same deal with all of them. He could have screwed us. All he had to do was turn on his radio, and we'd be dead. He didn't do that. He would come out and work on his car. And we'd go, all right, he's right here, shoot that way. Now move over here, shoot that way. We could avoid him, and he thought he was going to screw us, and he just couldn't do it. And the neighborhood turned on him, and they pariahed him. But it was, that's the experience I just had watching it again, is just how lovely and sweet and kind. And, you know, we had 9 working hours a day because that's all you have with the kids. That's a lot of film. And our crew, I mean, we'd come in every day and go, I have a dream. I have a dream. We get 12 pages today, and they would hustle it. And Mike would come. I'll tell one more story about Mike. So every day around, our days tended to end around 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And around 3 o'clock, Mike would come over and he'd go, how many shots you got left? And I go, 5? And he'd go, how about 2? But he wouldn't walk away at that point. At that point, he and I would look at our boards, look at our script, and figure out together how to make 2 better than 5. That's why he's an Academy Award-nominated producer. He doesn't just deliver you the problem, he solves the problem. And that was our whole team from top to bottom. So, anything you want to add to that? Talk about me and how great I am.
I can't remember the director's name, but he was very good. Very good. No, and what Jason's given me a lot of credit for helping figure out what those shots are, but it was him who really knew the film so well that he could, when that sort of pressure comes on and we're like, what can we do? How do we make this shorter, but how do we make it better? Who would come up with the ideas of like, here's what we can do. And particularly the last scene in the movie, the goodbye scene, it was designed for just a huge number of shots when we walked in. And he walked in, he's like, I have a dream, everyone. And the whole crew, gather around the whole crew. He's like, here's what we're gonna do. And we just combined, into kind of one moving shot, and we planned on dissolves and fades, and it just worked out beautifully. But, we weren't gonna there was no way we were gonna make the day. And we've been talking about it all weekend, and it came in on Monday, and we made that day. So, but it was a lot of fun. It was a joy. You learn over time. There's a lot of different ways to make movies. You can work incredibly long, awful days. You can work incredibly long, good days. But the mood of a set comes from the top. It comes from the director. It comes from the producer, and you can make this a joy or you can make this a war, and it's a choice. And it was one of my early opportunities to go, oh, I'm just gonna try whenever I have a choice to work with people who are gonna make it a joy to work with, and Jason is that person. So yeah.
So,
it says up there that I wrote the film, but Jason, of course, and I worked together, and he added so much to it. But I want to give a shout out to this kid, Ryan Merriman. You might not have heard the line because you were already laughing when he becomes a sex expert and he's telling everybody, oh, they can do this and they can do. You were laughing over when he said, well, they can do Philatides and Congulius. I didn't write that. Ryan auditioned and said that, and you tell him what happened on the set.
It actually, I don't remember him auditioning, but when we rehearsed the scene that day, that's how he said it. And of course, everybody laughed. And I said, if anybody corrects him, I will kill you. From now on, it is Philatides and Congulius, That's what it is.
So would you say this first significant directorial experience changed your perspective on acting? Like, what do you think you came out of this movie with the biggest lesson from this movie for all of you, by the way?
My understanding of acting evolves up to a minute ago. I mean, it keeps changing and growing. What this did was engaging with 4 kids who were not seasoned actors, and how do you get And you know, some of this stuff is a little dicey. You don't know what are they comfortable with. I mean, I think that was Amy Braverman's first kiss ever in life. You know, and you know that, and you don't want it to be weird, and you want it to be fun, and you want them to. I think we felt very paternal when we were doing this, and one of the reasons I think the set was so joyous is we always had 4 kids around, and we did not want them to have anything other than the best time of their lives. So that pulled a different kind of direction out of me. And in explaining how they could get to a result, I had to find different ways to, different games, different language, different things. So it definitely, and there's something wonderful about when you are tackling, as an actor, when you're tackling something that's very serious or very complex, think like a kid and demystify it. Simple, make it simpler, and you can often get to a pretty interesting result, or at least a pretty interesting place to begin and you know, demystify it.
Yeah, well, Mike, you told us the biggest lesson you learned from this film, but would you have anything to add? Like, what, you know, what did it change in your experience?
I mean, there's a few things. Working with kids can be a lot of fun, and you get very protective of them. So you know that's one of the things you're on set. You know, you've heard the stories of, you know, child stars and awful lives they had, and whenever we work with kids, we want to make sure that it's a positive experience, a safe experience, is something they take with them and really grow from. But you know, can look back and go, wow, that was wonderful. And so you know, you're protective of that. I mean, that's just something you have to do and know anytime. It's nice to do that with all people, not just kids. So that's something you kind of try to take with you. Again, it's, you know, I like to say, you know, great people make wonderful movies and great people make terrible movies. And terrible people make wonderful movies and terrible people make terrible movies. So that's not the thing that's going to decide whether the movie's good. And so, you know, working with people that are respectful and that create an environment where when we're spending, you know, 60, 70, 80 hours a week together, we're creating an environment that is, you know, happy and healthy and supportive and safe, you know, matters. It's our jobs, but it's a huge amount of time. We will be, again, that many hours, you know, you get tired, you get cranky, and you still got to figure out how to, you know, be respectful. And I think, you know, that was my second film. I had been working by that time for 12 years in the business already, and worked on films that were, you know, all sorts of different environments. And it's part of why that is important, and that's part of the lesson. And this was sort of acting on that learning for me.
Great. Well, thank you for this advice. We have a few minutes to open up our conversation to the audience. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hands. Let's keep in mind that questions end with a question mark. So let's keep it brief. So as many people can ask, as many people as possible can ask questions.
I have one right here. This is to the writer of the screenwriter. I was very moved when you described the difference between a job, you know, when people were putting somebody down, you know, I'm the queen of the city, or I give people journeys. Did you write that young?
We wrote that together, that scene. Do you remember? You know, we crafted that scene after the fact. And we talked it, and that's the thing about collaboration. You become so involved, nobody takes credit, and you just know you come out with something really that's going to resonate. And we almost called the movie "The Queen of the Chrysler Building," but you know, but there wasn't trying to be a lesson in here, but those little things came out. And my favorite line in the movie is, "Hey, Phil, I'm collecting."
On your side.
I have one.
The question's for Jason. You said in your introduction that your babies were in the movie. I think I got it right. Was it your baby and the baby carrot?
No. So both of my sons are in the movie. They're both in the first opening, that long sequence where they pan down the building and go down the street. When they hit the bottom of the building, there's a tiny infant in curls in a woman's arms. That was my son Noah with his nanny, Lisa. And if you kept going down the block, there are two little boys bouncing a ball back and forth, and the one that can't throw or catch is my son, Dick. And the other's, that's right, the other was Mike's nephew, that's right.
I've got one over here. Can we pass?
I was kind of fascinated by, first of all, I was not familiar with this movie. I did not know I was coming here to see a 25-year-old movie, which was fabulous, and I want to thank you, first of all. I think this was great. And by the way, I'm a Bronx boy from the 50s, okay? And it was nothing like this. I'm only kidding. But what I really found interesting was that you came here to talk about a movie that's 25 years old, all right? And I'm kind of curious from a film perspective, okay? First of all, how long did it take you to put this all together? And then what's happened in between? I was never familiar with this movie. I never heard about it, all right? Where has it gone? What's happened to it, all right? Maybe a little bit of history or what happened. Have you talked about it since in these 25 years? Any discussions?
Well, you guys may know this is a really multiple perspective.
No. Yikes. They didn't tell you it was a 25-year-old movie? Sucker. I probably paid more attention than Jason because he had other things to do. But because it got an R rating, it was a little off the charts. So, Jason and I toured. We went to a lot of the cities, and a number of film festivals picked it up. And then it was streaming a lot, and I guess Sony Classics let it slip away. And I just walked away from the movie business. I'm a writer, and I started writing novels. In fact, some of you might have gotten my latest book, which I'm hoping to turn into a streaming series. And it's called Don't Tell Me How to Die. But let me tell you, if there's somebody here that wants to share this film with somebody at home, I put the movie on my website. It's free. Unless Amir wants a cut. Now, and my last name is Karp, Marshall Karp, and my website is Karp Kills, as in there. And if you look under cool stuff, you'll see my movie, or as it's known in LBI, Jason's movie.
By the way, Marshall wrote a script called Cherry Pink, which is this movie. The only problem is we couldn't get the rights to the song Cherry Pink and had to change the song and the title of the movie to Just Looking. What happened afterwards? I mean, so I had just met Jason. I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, he was off of Seinfeld, and I, as most people who didn't know him, didn't know what to expect. And I got this kind human being here, and we wound up becoming friends. I did a mockumentary that Jason agreed to come and work on. He was Zamboni Phil, excellent. And then we were partners for a number of years when we were doing your first show, Bob Patterson, after Seinfeld, and we did the Agent Cody Banks movies, and we were partnered for a few years. And then I was in LA at the time, and I moved back to New York. But we have, and I've done other stuff. And then, but we've stayed in touch, and occasionally Marshall, I live in New Jersey, and there was a little play. I live in Westfield, New Jersey, and there's a little theater that was doing one of Marshall's old plays. Marshall was all set to come out. We're going to go watch, and there was a snowstorm, and then he bailed. But no, we've stayed in touch over the years, and we've been good friends since. And you know, it's sometimes you get lucky. I like to hope that I'll make, you know, maybe one real friend on any film, and sometimes you get lucky and you make a really good one for life. So there we go.
Great.
There's one right
guys,
over here.
okay,
I just want to say there are a lot of filmmakers out here. I wish you the experience that we had. I don't know how many joyful experiences there are, but this was a labor of love. We had a great time.
Can I give you one example of that? About, you can only do this stuff if you're having a great time. At the very last shot of the movie, when the car's pulling away, we kind of crane up. So we can kind of we didn't have a crane. And it was just like this low angle kind of, the last shot.
Great shot.
Yeah, that's, you know. So we didn't have a crane. And Mike standing around, I go, well, how high up can the dolly come? How high can we get on the natural boom of the dolly? Get about 6 feet. And I go, it's okay. It's not great. And then we look at one of the electrics trucks, and it's got the panel lift in the back. And we went, if we put the dolly on the panel lift, and that'll get up about 5.5 feet. And then if we start dollying as we boom up, if it hits the top, we can get about 11 feet in the air. That might be well, that only comes when you're not sitting around going, you can't do it. Nothing you can do. You didn't plan for it, forget it. It's not going to happen. What happened to the film is, honestly, this is what happened. Yeah.
More to that story.
What?
The crane.
Oh, the crane shot. That was a different.
No. The shot you're talking about at the end?
Yeah.
When we did that and got to 11 feet high, it moved too fast. We had no control over the speed. The lift gate, we also had to settle the argument between the Teamsters and the electricians who was actually to operate the lift gate. But it went too fast. So we're like, now what do we do? And Jason's like, well, no, our DP, Fred, was like, we could overcrank the camera. And we're like, but if we overcrank the camera, the car's going to be moving really slowly, and the people in the background are going to look weird. We're like, they don't move, and they gun it, which we did, and nearly hit another car turning the corner. But that's the shot in the movie. It's the lift gate, the dolly, the overcrank. You know. So anyway, there was a lot more.
Do we have time for another question?
Just to finish off what you were saying. So this is what happens, filmmakers. We actually got pretty great reviews, but we opened on a weekend with 3 other independent films. One of them was called The Contender with Joan Allen. It was a political thriller. It won the weekend by a landslide, and that was the end of the story. So if you don't, in a film like this, where your first weekend is critical, if you're not the one that wins, you don't win. So the film had a nice journey from that point on, but not perhaps what it could have been. And Mike and I went into business. Marshall left filmmaking, went into books, right? Mike and I went into business for almost 10 years, and we produced a number of cool things. Most of them did not happen. A couple did. None of them were runaway hits, except for Agent Cody Banks, which is another story we can tell you another time. And then I wasn't getting those jobs. So I started directing some television stuff. And when that started to dry up, I went to the theater and have never been happier. My whole life, I thought was going to be the theater. In the 80s, I was working on Broadway. That's all I fantasized. When I was growing up in Essex County, New Jersey, I just wanted to get across the river and start working in those buildings. And that was happening. I never thought about film, never thought about television, never thought about directing. Suddenly, this guy, Jerry Seinfeld, goes, come out to Los Angeles to make a show about New York. And while I was standing there, I went, it's 4 cameras. It's kind of like a play. It can't be that hard. Can I direct one? They went, yeah, sure. And that's how I became a film director. So you just never know. You follow the journey. You make your thing. You make it with love. You make it with passion. You push for it as hard as you can. You parent it as hard as you can. And then you kiss it up. And you never know where it or you are going to land 25 years later.
All right. I believe time is up. Thank you very much, guys, for coming.
Pleasure.
and talking
Thanks for
about the
coming,
movie.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.